Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Purple Noon, a podcast. I am Stephanie Conti, and I am here with the user RIP Dunkachino, also known as Savanna Lanausse. Now, Savanna, would you like to explain the RIP?
I'm very sad. Stephanie showed me this great account that was just posting the scene from Jack and Jill Dunkachino. It was called Daily Dunkachino, and they would just post remixes of Dunkachino's song in that scene.
And edits and things like that. And I think a few days ago they announced the final clip and they said that they would no longer be producing content.
Yeah, I'm very sad. I looked forward to those videos, and it's over, you know?
I really wonder, like, that makes you really, like, because they've been doing this for years. What's going on in their life? Are they going to college? Are they having their first newborn baby? Like, what do you think? What do you like to imagine the story is of their retirement, essentially, from the Dunkachino memes?
It really could just be something simple. It was like, I can't be doing this anymore. You know, like
I
I grow up.
financially cannot keep editing these clips anymore.
And they started during the pandemic. So I think it's just a matter of like, okay, it's time for me to get out of get to the real world again. And
Yeah.
I respect that. I get it. But it will be missed.
Hmm.
I
At
feel
least the
like
account will always be there. You could just check it, unless did the guy say he was going to delete the account?
I don't think so. But
That's good.
I just feel like the Dunkachino stands are a very small and intimate group.
I
So
think that's just you and me, Savannah, at
there's
this
people
point in
that
time,
follow
and the
him.
guy who owns that Dunkachino Twitter account.
Man, I'd like to talk to him. Ask him what his journey has been. How did he get here?
Oh my god. So, you know what I feel like? I feel like I feel like every 5 episodes, Dunkachino comes up. It's definitely been a topic of conversation within the podcast. I kind of feel like at this point, maybe you gotta change your social handles.
No.
Maybe you gotta be like Miss Dunkachino.
Oh, yes. I thought you were gonna tell me to let it go, never.
No,
But
no, 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 no. I'm saying conform.
I already have Dunkachino in my bio. It's such a cultural reset. Nobody talks about it.
It's in your wait, which bio?
It just says Dunkachino in my Twitter bio.
Stop. No, I have to see this for myself. I've never noticed that before.
Yes.
What? I'm looking it up right now. Okay. Yeah. Wow. It really is. You have Christ, and then you have the Christ emblem, and then Dunkachino. What?
Jesus and Dunkachino. That is who I am inside.
That's all you
Do
need.
you remember when we first talked about that? I feel like that's how we bonded too.
I feel like yeah, definitely. It was a.
'Cause nobody
I
knows
think
that.
one of
Nobody
the
knows
first
Dunkachino.
conversations we had was talking about like movies and actors and whatnot, and I can definitely see us going, oh, you like Al Pacino? Oh yeah, Dunkachino, Dunkachino. Like I could feel it kind of riffing off like that.
I don't I sometimes think about if I ever met Al Pacino, if I'd bring it up. I don't think I would, but, um,
I
I
feel
need to
like that's a
convey.
thing we would be very common for if we met like actors and actresses that we liked, like that we had like an appreciation for either their weakest or smallest or middle skill stuff compared to the entirety of their career. Like obviously Al Pacino and Dunkachino and things like that. For me, if I ever met Matt Damon, I would be like, dude, I loved you on 30 Rock. Like out of this man's entire career, I would just be like, but 30 Rock though.
I mean, like, it's the guy who played the Godfather is dancing in a Dunkin' Donuts. Like, can that is how could we not pay attention to that?
I mean, yeah. I mean that is true. That's also kind of like I feel like if I met Tom Cruise, I'd be like Tropic Thunder,
Oh god.
you know, things like that. Man, I'm trying to think what would be like the worst. Like what would be like the worst circumstance? Like which actor and what would you mention?
You'd have to do something they're embarrassed about, like, they don't like, you remember how, Faye
Going up to
Donahue.
Dev Patel, Avatar, because he played Zuko in the live action Avatar movie.
That's awful. That
Hmm.
is awful. Yeah, it'd have to be something like that where they're just, like, embarrassed of it. Like, you remember how, Faye Donahue didn't wanna talk about, like, the Joan Crawford movie ever?
Really?
Yeah, like, she doesn't talk about it.
Hmm.
She does not talk about it, it's, like, a thing, you can't
It
ask
was
her.
just like a box office dud, essentially.
I think she thought she was gonna win the Oscar, and then the reviews came out, and
Ah.
it's just something she will not talk about. I think it has to be a little bit below that level. It has to be almost there.
Yeah. Like, I feel like if I did meet Val Kilmer. I feel like if I had gone up to Val Kilmer and, people be like, "Oh, dude, The Doors. Oh, dude, Top Gun." And I just looked at him and was like, "The island of Dr. Moreau?" He would be
I
like,
don't
"Get
know
out."
what that is, but that sounds great.
It was a weird island movie with Brando. That's why I know of it.
Oh! Oh
Where
my
Brando
god.
wears, like, glue for foundation because that's how pale he looks in it. Like, I feel like that would be a solid one, but I wouldn't do that to I wouldn't have done that to Val Kilmer. He's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else. I really just think, like,
You
I
know
don't
who
know,
would
I feel like that
appreciate
could either
Dunkachino?
go.
You
What
know
was
who would
that?
appreciate Dunkachino?
Maybe so, maybe not.
I
I really
feel like the people from New England that are obsessed with Dunkin' Donuts would appreciate Dunkachino.
Oh, I think so, but I don't think that they would go up to Al Pacino and be like, "Hey,
Oh, no, I'm just
Dunkachino,"
saying
you
maybe
know?
there's our people live there, you know?
I think our people, Savannah, are very fine and few amongst the living because I feel like majority of our people are dead because of how much old culture we like. I mean, I like Marlon Brando. No person our age know whose that is, what he did, or anything like that,
Yeah,
you
maybe
know?
you're right.
Or people when I go, "Oh, yeah, Marlon Brando," they just go, "Godfather." And I'm like, "There's so much more. There was so much more than just Godfather."
Yeah.
But I guess we got to get back into our review because we got a lot coming up. We actually have a three-parter all in one episode. So I'm just gonna say three-parter all in one episode because in case of any continuity error or anything like that, we are recording these three different reviews at three different times. With the first one today because it's a trilogy, and we're gonna be talking about the Three Colors Trilogy by the great Krzysztof Kieslowski. So, Three Colors Trilogy is a part of the Criterion, and we are going to go in the order of release. So, the order we are going to go is blue, white, and red. Not only does it make sense of it chronologically, but in terms of the finale in red, it ties everything together. So that is the recommended way that I suggest viewing. Blue and white, I feel like could be interchangeable though, but just keep red last. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
So if you're gonna watch it, go watch it. Either that way with that kind of mindset because red, you don't want to spoil the endings for red. But today we're going to start off with Blue. So Blue came out in 1993, once again directed and written by Krzysztof Kieslowski. And essentially, it's about a woman struggles to find a way to live her life after the death of her husband and child in a car accident. And so it stars Juliette Binoche as Julie, and also Charlotte Verret as Lucille, and most notably, Hugo. I believe it's Hugh. It's Hugues. I've never seen that name
I think it's
before.
Hugh.
I
It
think it's
has
Hugh. Hugh
yeah.
Quester as Patrice, and yeah, and then we have Helene Vincent as the journalist. And then of course we do have it even I'm surprised in Blue that it's also listed the characters um Dominique and Caro from White are even listed in the credits to Blue.
Mhm.
Which I think they're only there for like 1 second too,
They
you
are, you
know?
see them passing by, like, real quick.
Yeah. But alas, so that is the story of Blue. So, Savannah, what are your thoughts on Blue? Non spoiler in case no one has seen the person listening to this hasn't seen it yet and they're wondering if they should watch it.
Blue is very and I mean this in the best way possible because I know it's gonna sound negative, but it's very emotionally tolling in the sense that you are watching this woman grieve the whole time.
Hmm.
But the grief is so realistic that it's also a very interesting story on top of the grief. But I think with a lot of movies, we see characters that are grieving and at the end of it they come to some kind of peace. But with this movie, you really feel the grief this woman is feeling.
Mhm.
And there isn't necessarily, not no spoilers here, there isn't necessarily like a moment where it's like all better, but you kind of see this woman trying to crawl out of a hole essentially. And it's very accurate. Her day to day is very accurate. So with that, I appreciate the movie a lot because I think there is this in film, I think there is this timeline sense where like, okay, she's got to grieve and get better within a 2 hour circumstance. But I
Find new
think
love, start a new family, do this all over again type of situation.
yeah, and I think the movie kinda says, like, "No, like, this is gonna be forever," in a way. So, I've always liked the movie because you can kind of almost relate to the character. Even if you're not grieving, you can almost feel that emotional, like, toll she has. But the movie is very I like the movie. It's probably my least favorite out of all of them, but it's still fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately with the Three Colors trilogy, like, all of them are bangers to say
Yeah,
the
all
least.
of them regardless, like, they're all fantastic.
But I do think, Three Colors Blue, I would have to say it is probably my least favorite, but I still think it's an incredible movie. Like, it's least favorite, but, like, keep in mind, it's probably still in my top 20. It's just least favorite in comparison to
Exactly.
Red and White. I think you hit it on the nail where it's really a movie about grief, and I think what makes this movie so unique is there is no climax, there is no resolution, there is
Yes.
no, peaking point or twist and turn. It's all just about coping. And you would think a movie about coping with grief wouldn't be as fascinating or as even as, and I'll say the word entertaining lightly. I mean, it can do a really good job keeping keeping your attention, not necessarily where it's like, oh my God, she just, there's been an accident. Now she has superpowers. It's not entertaining like that. It's not entertaining like a Marvel movie. It just does a really great job at keeping your attention and has great pacing. So I do highly recommend the entire trilogy, absolutely, and I think you would too, right?
Absolutely.
So, but I want to talk more about and kind of pick at certain pieces of this movie and really break it down. So, since this movie is really centered around the topic of grief, let's talk about how we're introduced to this character. Like, I like the idea, and we're gonna get into to pretty much what would be the spoiler parts, the things that aren't not set or not said in that little
Mhm.
intro. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it first. But the way that this character is introduced, I always found fascinating because usually with grieving stories and stuff, it's not until the halfway point where we see, the death and the grieving actually begin. The grieving starts in the beginning, like within the first 5 minutes of the movie.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like a lot of, like, more somber movies about grieving and stuff, they always happen smack dab in the middle because they wanna show you what, the relation was like beforehand, to kinda give it a sense of validity, I would assume. But it really just 5 minutes in, and the way it is presented is incredible because we see, the character played by Juliette Binoche, Julie, um in her hospital bed, and she's the sole survivor of a car accident that killed her son and her husband and her daughter.
Yeah.
And there's this really like intimate moment in the beginning where she's underneath the covers of her hospital bed watching the video of the funeral being televised. I
Yeah.
I always loved the way that scene looked and how it was presented because it was just so different. I just wouldn't have imagined showing a character grieving like that, where not only are you showing her grieving, but from at a distance from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she maintains that distance pretty much throughout the entirety of the movie. It's like there's never really a moment where until of course maybe the ending you could consider where she gets up close and personal with her grieving. It always seems like she's trying to keep distance at it or run away. And what do you agree? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, and I think what the movie did is make her grief very subtle. And I think that's realistic. I think if you're in a situation like that, a lot of the time you're going to be in shock and you're not going to know how to deal with it. There's not this big emotional thing like some movies portray. I think the movie made it to where she's kind of has to swallow this little by little.
Yeah, and even there is a point where it could have been made so much more dramatically, where in the
Yeah.
beginning, she actually tries to commit suicide by swallowing a bunch of pills,
Right.
and it's not, like, this very grand gesture. You just see her, like, very quickly just shove a bunch of pills in her mouth, and then after a second, she just decides to spit them all out, and she quietly goes to a nurse and goes, "Yeah, I couldn't do it. I'm gonna go back to bed." And
Yeah.
it's this it really like, that intro really just sets the tone for
Right.
this character. Um, and now to more get into specifically about um, the husband. So the husband was a composer, a very well-known composer who was working on, I guess you could say, his like final symphony. And what I there was this one, and I did not actually catch it until the second time I watched it. I never knew that there was speculations in this movie that actually Julie was the one who was composing everything.
Yeah.
I was very surprised. It was only when in the beginning an interview says like, "Were you the one writing it the entire time?" And she doesn't give an answer, and we don't find an answer the entire movie. Essentially, we only know that she knows how to read her husband's handwriting, and she knows kind of what her husband is thinking, but without ever announcing or saying blatantly that she's the one who does all the composing.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me of there was a newer movie not too long ago. I think it was called The Wife. Did you ever see that one?
I have not.
Where it's very similar, where it's about like I believe it was a scientist, and it takes place on the night the scientist is winning a Nobel Peace Prize, and or just a Nobel Prize, and his after years and years, he ends up like revealing that it was his wife who did all the work,
Wow.
and that he just took credit for her because they didn't want to, because just at the times and stuff like that, they weren't willing to believe a woman. So she kind of uses him as a front. But now here he
Wow.
is, 40 something years later. That's a really good movie. I highly recommend the watch. It's really, really good. I believe it's called The Wife.
Okay,
But
I'm gonna give it a
that
shot.
was the only time I've seen a circumstance similar to that, you
That's
know?
very interesting.
And which, by the way, I don't know if you know, but there are actually speculations, and this is just a random fun fact, that Einstein was not as smart as he was, and that it really was his wife who came up with all of his theories.
Ooh, I have not heard of that.
Yeah,
That's really interesting.
there was a theory saying that like the theory of relativity and all of his like big moments were actually theorized by his wife.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be, you never
interesting.
know.
Interesting. Um, let's talk about the different characters that we meet in Three Colors Blue.
Yeah.
What did you think? So overall, is there anything you want to note about Julie's kind of dissension, ascension throughout the entire movie? Is there anything particular that you were really fond of her character?
I think I like the fact that it just seemed like, um trying to find the words. There is a no, because no, because I wanna get into spoilers.
No, it's okay. We could we're past spoilers at this point. We're good.
Okay, so I think the scene that is pinnacle for me is when she's in the water. The shot of her, like, in is it the,
Yeah, she's
it's
at like a community pool.
yeah, okay, it's a pool, and I think it just gives you very simple, uh a simple visual of what she is going through throughout the whole movie. She's essentially drowning, and I think she does a very good job at being this woman that's sort of, like, grasping at her
Mhm.
grief the whole time, but also trying not to it's all very subtle, and I think I like that the most because it's most realistic.
And not only is she like trying to grapple with the grief and everything like that, she's also discovering a lot about her husband she didn't know. Like,
Yes,
for
so that's
example,
also
that he had a mistress who ends up becoming pregnant with his child, you know? And the thing is, it seemed like everyone knew except her. and I can only imagine, like, it in reality, how much of a big, giant burn that must have felt, to be like, "Oh, I've been supporting," and she herself had been having an affair and having to keep it quiet and everything like that, but seemingly everyone knew that he was sleeping around with another woman and got her pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah. I also wanted to say I like the movie. I think the movie also shows how much of memory is a big part of grieving
Yes.
because she kind of lives in those for a little bit. Um,
Ye yeah,
so
and I
I
I
think
think they do that with also the use of her mother. Her mother, if funny enough, has dementia in the movie,
yeah,
and it's really funny because she ends up like, not, I don't wanna say resenting, but she ends up getting frustrated at her mother for not remembering her. Meanwhile, her mother is doing exactly what she wants to the capability to do with her husband and her daughter.
yeah,
So I always enjoyed the irony of that situation. How here she is, she's like, "Why don't you remember it? Why don't you remember it?" And kind of like enacting as like, I'll just say like the ghost of her husband and her daughter and things like that, to her essentially.
yeah, yeah. You see it a lot with her, and then you see it a lot just in general. I think a big part of memory is at the beginning when she's basically seeing um, her daughter and her husband get buried. And I think that's a really significant thing to have that in your memory too, and have that playing over and over again. Um, yeah, I think the director also, obviously it's blue, so there's just the whole movie has this bluish tone, but I really like how most of the time, like I don't know how to if I'm explaining this right, but the blue kind of radiates from her.
Yeah, and you could tell, like, that she subconsciously keeps divulging herself in the blue.
Yeah.
Not only is, like, blue as an expression of grief and everything like that and keeping herself there, but also her daughter's room was, I just known as the blue room. And it's funny how she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm gonna move away from this house and things like that. I'm gonna get away from here." But yet she keeps, like, a little tiny chandelier that is made of, like, these blue crystals that was in her daughter room, and she puts it up. Then she goes to the pool, which is entirely blue. Like the way that she, inadvertently is trying to run away from her past, yet also simultaneously drowning in it, as you said.
Mhm.
I also really loved the way that they kind of show off that she's thinking about her passing family because they don't do flashbacks. We really don't ever get to see the face of her husband and her daughter, but instead we know she's thinking about them in ways where all of a sudden a blue light will shine on her or flash in the background and her husband's music plays, and she kind of has these like very time stopping moments to her where she reacts to it and just is kind of taken aback
Yeah.
by just the sudden memory of them. And I loved how they do that because I feel like they could have done it like via flashbacks, where maybe if she saw an image, it could have flashed back to a similar image she had when she was, with her husband or daughter or whatever, but instead they decided to utilize music, which I thought was really smart of them to do.
Oh, for sure.
And also just really convey not only the sense of memory, but also this kind of new haunting where it's like, am I going to complete my husband's work?
Yeah.
And it's also it really is, even though it feels like such a simple story, it really runs deep because it's not just completing her husband's work. It's completing her husband's work with her husband's essentially friend and I believe work partner who she was having an affair with and he never knew and things like that. It's also just overcoming guilt and coming to terms with everything not only that has happened but that she's done too.
Yeah.
Think it
Yeah.
it it really is just extremely well written, and I don't think any, Krzysztof Kieslowski film is anything but well written.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I mean, the also her having to deal with, like, essentially this new baby after she lost hers.
yeah.
That is such a I so this movie is just never-ending grief because she has to not only grieve for the past, but also grieve for her future, essentially.
Yeah, and I think also, not only grieving for her past, but, like, grieving for her past at different moments. She
Yeah.
has to grieve the moment that she physically lost her husband, but also now she has to come to terms with the moment that he fell in love with another woman, which is like, another grieving point
Yeah.
in her life. and then not only grieving the loss of her daughter, but now grieving the loss of husband is now having another kid with another woman,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's just I really like the idea that they've made grieving so multifaceted. It's not just, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna mourn this event." If you lose someone, it's not just events, it could be items, it could be things, it could be music, it could be anything tied to that person, that place, that thing, whatever it could be?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think most of all, like, she is grieving herself. Now she has to form this new life because it's not like because she was a mother and a supporting wife. Now that is away from her. Now she has to form an entirely new identity.
Yeah.
So really, like, I really think in terms of, like I said, writing, this really is one of like the pinnacle. Like this trilogy is really the pinnacle of writing. It is not my favorite writing because you and I are both a big fan of the movie White, and we'll talk about that in the next part. But I really just think even though that this is the lesser to me of the trilogies, it's still an incredible movie.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, do you think, compared to the other three, do you think that this is overall, like, whether writing, directing, acting, your least, or like, does it kind of shift between category? Because I will say, I do kind of feel like even though I do prefer White more, Blue does have a little bit more of stronger directing.
I also think visually, Blue is the better movie.
Yes.
Um, and I think personally, there is a little bit more like, you can whether you're grieving or not, you can kind of relate to her because I think we can all kind of understand losing your personhood in a way and starting over because that's essentially what she's trying to do, like you said. I feel like White is very it is a wild story, and of course it has meanings, but it is just the craziest stories, and
There's
a
not
lot
a
of
lot of
time
you're not unless you have had some toxic relationships in your life.
yeah.
I don't think you're gonna be able to relate to White as much as the movie Blue or even Red for that matter, you
Yeah.
know?
White is more of, like, this chaotic adventure. It is our favorite because I think it is a chaotic adventure, and it's a movie like we've never seen before.
Yeah.
But Blue has more personable undertones, and then Red is sort of it's not a mix of both, but it's a little bit more in between of the 2 movies.
Yeah, it definitely takes some elements like that unpredictability slash chaosness from White while also that relatability and even some somber undertones from Blue?
Exactly. So I think each movie has its strengths over the other.
Mhm. There is something that I found out while watching the movie, and it was I don't know if you noticed, but do you remember where Julie she kind of experiences like she's enraged, and I think it's shortly after she finds out that her husband had a mistress,
Mm,
and she takes her knuckles and she like runs it against this kind of cobblestone gravelly looking wall.
right.
So I don't know if you know, but one thing I was really surprised with was that she was originally supposed to wear a prosthetic coating over her knuckles to protect her knuckles,
Oof.
and it wasn't fitting. And she said, "Oh, screw it. I'm just going to go through and do it." And she did it, and not realizing how much it would like tatter up her knuckles.
Ugh.
She ended up like she said that it took over a year for like the scars to actually heal and stuff because she didn't think it was that sharp when she touched it.
Oh, that is
So
rough.
actually throughout most of the movie, you do see like the remnants of like in the scaling and the bruising of her knuckles.
Well, add a little bit of realism.
For sure. But I also imagine like how much that would have hurt, literally just running your knuckles against razor blades, sharp rocks essentially.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? So Blue and the ending is kind of just her her getting together and finally going, "Okay, it's okay to grieve," and her reconciling with what's going on, and she even makes a lot of really great gestures to, um, Patrice I believe it is Patrice, right? Who is Oh, no, I'm sorry. I said Patrice. Patrice is her husband.
Yeah.
Oliver.
Mhm.
Oliver is the one who is the partner that she, works with and has an affair with and everything. So she kinda comes to terms with in the end where she, with her grieving and whatnot, where she even like, her old home, she gives to the mistress and, kinda gives, I don't wanna say a blessing, but her support to the mistress for having the kid and stuff, and I believe the woman even acknowledges that she's having a boy, and she plans on naming it after the late husband, Patrice.
Mm.
Um, and she does kind of it's not set in stone, but it does seem like that she is gonna try to work things out with Olivier and stuff like that. But what did you think of the ending to Blue?
I think the ending is essentially just her having some freedom over her grief.
Mhm.
I think she's trying finally starting to accept, like you said, she's starting to accept things, and with that does come, and in general with grief, it does give you some liberty. So I think the ending is giving us some conclusion. Like they're trying to say, like, yeah, she's gonna be okay. This is her liberty from grief. So I did like it because it still gives you that closure, but it also tells you like, hey, this is gonna be a very, very long time, but this is the start of her healing.
Yeah.
So again, like I said in the beginning, I think it's just I like how they don't give you like, oh, she's good now, she's hopeful. No, she's starting to accept it, and I think that's very realistic.
Yeah. And it's not a grand ending. It's not
No.
like, oh, we feel like we can close the chapter on the book, but it is some type of reconciliation with her past. Um, I feel like in terms of between red and white, blue is just kind of, it is what it is. There's not a lot of deducing. There's not a lot of, even though it still is a complicated story, there's nothing like further. There's no like, theories. Oh, maybe this happened. Like people can have theories about White with the ending and the
Mhm.
way, what would have happened afterwards and stuff. It really just, this is a story that just plays out from beginning to end with no climax, no real solid resolution or ending and things like that. And it still works. It still works heavily. And it's not bad that it has the lack of. I actually think that the film is more powerful because it doesn't fall with those conventional ways of storytelling.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, oh, and also for those who may not know, in the French flag, so the Three Colors trilogy is based off the French flag, which is blue, white, and red. Same colors as the US.
Woo.
But essentially, the blue part actually represents freedom. So
Okay. I
I
didn't
do
know that.
feel like that is a good way to tie in, even though, because I don't think there's a color on the flag that represents grieving, but I feel like her coming to terms with everything slowly and subtly in the end is a great way to represent the freedom that she's now giving herself.
Absolutely.
So, do you think, the only thing I think there is speculation of, do you think she was the one that was writing all the music?
Yeah,
You think so?
I think so.
I think so too. Um, Only because I feel like maybe that's why she has an even further sense of responsibility to complete it.
Yeah, I think, and also think about it. In all honesty, I think the her finding out about the mistress, I would have thrown his work out. Be like, "Nah, you
And
wanna do
she
that? You
did
wanna
one
get
part of
pregnant?"
it, but there were backups of it at
No, that's
like,
what I'm saying. I would have just burned it and been done with it, but I think it was bigger than that for her because it was also her work. You know, whether or not she wrote the whole thing by herself, she was completely involved. So I
yeah.
do think I don't know about you, but my response, if it was not my work, I think I would have just left it and burned it, and I would have want nothing to do with it after such a big betrayal.
Yeah, and I think, like, imagining it from her perspective, um, I think she does it not to do it for her husband. Because in the
Yeah.
end, everyone knows that she's not gonna be, she might be accredited for like, oh, helping and receiving the files, but she's not gonna be accredited for the work. And I think she realized that getting the accreditation was a lot less important to her than actually completing the piece and just using that as a way to like metaphorically close that chapter of her life and start moving on.
Yeah,
Now, before I like we said, the directing in here is just fantastic, as with all the other films of this trilogy and just Kieslowski films in general. But of course, I feel like we just have to mention that the music, it really does a solid job. The music is probably the best in this one out of the Three Colors trilogy. I mean, you're gonna make
for sure.
a movie that's centered around music and not have a good soundtrack. You know, it's
Yeah,
fantastic. Um, did you and I think there are some beautiful moments where it added, to the directing, like, where she's tracing her finger over the notes, and as she's, like, moving across, we hear the music playing, and, whenever she goes, "Oh, add flute, add this," we start hearing it all come together. I
of
really think that
course.
was probably a really great and inventive way to just show how her train of thought into making everything, reading off the notes. And as someone I'm not musically inclined. I don't know how to read sheet music and stuff, but to show how it's brought to life was a really great way to represent it.
Yeah. The music and the score definitely had character.
Absolutely. And it fits well and it worked well, whether and even just the moments where even I love the addition of the choir because like there's that moment where she's in the pool and she's trying to get up and then all of a sudden like she just hears like an entire church choir just singing out and calling out to her as she remembers everything. It was beautiful. I've been trying to get the soundtrack for it on vinyl, but I can't. I can only find it if it's in like a bundle of all three movies, but I own two movies on vinyl
Yeah.
and it's like $200 or someone is selling it for like $80.
Yeah, that's
And
expensive.
I'm sorry, I just wasn't expecting that. I just really wasn't
We were talking
expecting
about
that.
music, so I was just, like, breaking out into
I
song.
know, but I really that took me aback. I almost choked. That really I had to look away for a second because I just wasn't expecting that. That was really great. You were really on key there,
Thank
sweetie.
you.
Um
Um
But yeah, so I really hope I can get the soundtrack on vinyl. But overall, I can't really ask, would you own it on DVD? Because I'm pretty sure you and I both own the Criterion version of it.
We do.
We absolutely do. And what is your rating for Blue?
Okay, I'm gonna give it an 8.8. I really love the movie. I think everybody can connect with it in some way. The only thing is it is slow sometimes, and I don't ever really rewatch this movie because the subject matter is very hard. I only rewatched it. I've only seen it twice outside of this.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just not something, and the only reason I rewatched it now is for the podcast. It's just not something I'd pick up and because it's very sad. It's a little depressing. So for me, it's not something I would go back to unless I'd have to or if I wanted to review something. So, but fantastic movie. I love it. 8.8 otherwise. I just the rewatchability factor isn't there for me.
I agree. I would have to give it a 9.0 right on the dot. Because I think all the movies in the series, like I said, are bangers.
Of
Um,
course.
but I think the rewatchability does affect it. Overall, it is a little bit hard to show people this movie. Like,
Mhm.
I've shown White to you, I've shown White to my mother, my boyfriend, and things like that. That's just something where it's like, hey, you want a wild ride? But this one is definitely a lot more somber. This is the one of the movies that I think that you'll enjoy watching if someone is actually into directing
Mhm.
or just very into
Even
like
music.
visuals and
Yeah.
music too, music as well. Um, but yeah, overall, I think it's just harder to rewatch and not only share with people. I think it has phenomenal writing. I think it's well acted, even though it's very simplistic. So that's why I will give it a 9. I really don't think that there's anything else that like it's one of those things where it's like I can't really say a bad thing about it,
No, no.
except that it really doesn't, to my opinion, appease as large of an audience as the other movies in the trilogy.
Sure.
So that is our thoughts on Blue. And next, we are going to talk about White. All right. So the next film that we're going to be talking about is White. the second installment of the Three Colors trilogy. So White came out in 1994, and the overall synopsis for it is after his wife divorces him, a Polish immigrant plots to get even with her. Once again, directed and written by Krzysztof Kieslowski. But in terms of the cast, we have, and pardon my Polish pronunciation, Zbigniew Zamachowski, who plays Karol Karol, as well as Julie Depli, playing Dominique. And in terms of other, lesser known characters within the story, we have Janusz Giecho, who plays Nikolai, and Jerzy Ster as Yurik. So that's pretty much, hopefully, my Polish pronunciation was pretty good. So overall, without getting into the spoilers, Savannah, what is your thoughts on White?
White walked so Gone Girl could run.
I agree. I totally agree.
It is a crazy ride, and it's really not like, and I'm comparing it to Gone Girl because there's similarities, but it really isn't like anything else you're ever gonna see.
Yeah.
It is super entertaining and a very crazy revenge story. I think it's probably in my one of the best revenge stories I've ever seen.
Oh, for sure.
It's very, even with a crazy plot line it has, it's actually pretty realistic. Like
You know,
it could happen. Could happen.
with two smart individuals, yes. Like it's not like how did you go from A to Z? It's like A, B, and like you see that build up and it makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Yeah. I really this was I think this was one of maybe one of the first movies you showed me,
Yeah.
and it was
This
just
is al like,
wild.
I truly think this is one of those movies where if you are looking to get into foreign films, obviously Parasite is a good one, but my second best recommendation is this movie. Even though it goes out of order in the trilogy, I feel like this is such a good way to really dip your toe into foreign films.
Agreed. Agreed.
So, because
So good.
usually, like, foreign films are a little bit slower paced, they're a little bit, especially, like, for example, if you wanna think, like, neorealism, where it's like, we see everything, or if you wanna look at, like, German films from the '70s, those kinda have a little bit of slowness to it. But
Right.
for the time and with the director and everything, this is a pretty fast-paced film in
Yeah.
terms of plot. So, if anyone is, really trying to dip their toe, I highly in foreign films, I really, really recommend White. White is my favorite out of the trilogy. Some people don't like it because it's so over the top. I love over the top, but still in the realm of realistic. Like,
Absolutely.
for example, this movie and The Woman Next Door give me that explosive, toxic couple. I love that stuff. Don't give me like any what is it? Don't give me like those like little cheesy TV shows like Days of Our Lives. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things like White and things like The Woman Next Door. That fiery, explosive, oh, I'm gonna burn your business down. Oh, I'm gonna frame you. And things like that. I'm gonna, you know, shoot you and then kill myself while we make love. Like things like that. Give me the mentally ill. I
The
love that.
mentally ill, that's
Give it.
exactly what it is.
I love it though because it adds such a sense of predictability and also adds a lot of just crazy emotions that the average person doesn't see on the regular, especially like in a movie like this where, and this is now we're going to get into spoiler parts, where literally from the get-go this woman faces her husband in court and goes, yeah, he can't get it up,
How
that's
sad.
why I'm leaving him. And it's like, whoa, this is petty. It starts off petty, it remains petty, and it
The whole
ends
movie
petty
is petty. The whole movie. Like,
completely.
and
So,
it's just a ride. It is a ride. But it's the best kind of ride.
yes. And I personally like I think this is honestly one of my favorite movies of all time. Definitely within my top 10, maybe even top 5 if I really have to think about it and start structuring things. But I just love that explosiveness and how it's like from the beginning, it's like, oh, we're not dealing with two stable people right now. This can go any single way. So she goes, I'm gonna leave you because you can't get it up and you can't consummate the marriage. He's like, but I love you. And then she makes him call the phone and rings the telephone and makes him watch her sleep with another man, and their divorce isn't even finalized. And it's just like, oh my God. And then she's like, I'm gonna frame you for arson. And it's like,
Yeah.
what?
Wait,
Like you
first, wait a minute. I also that is hilarious in itself because she is punishing him. I get maybe like the leaving part, fine, but then you throw in like a framing of a crime because he has a medical issue. What's going on? Why would
But
it? What?
what's so funny is like they had only been married for like what 1 or 2 months, I think it was.
It was a
But
quick thing,
right
yeah.
before the marriage, they said that they had sex. But the day after, it was like, whoa, and she got totally offended. Like, what do you think changed in this man's mind? Like, if he could do it the day before, there just could be a medical issue the day after.
They didn't
Like,
go to
take
a
it
doctor?
easy.
She
She
didn't.
took that personally. She looked at this man nude and took it personally,
But
which
it's
is
like,
just like,
fine
wow.
if you're not in if you feel like whatever, leave. But then framing for a crime? Like, what
Yeah.
happened? That's
Like, keep
mentally
in
ill.
mind,
That's
it wasn't
mental
like,
illness.
"Oh, I broke into your house," and things like that, "We haven't moved in yet." It was like, no, he went to the place where he worked and he slept and he had a key.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, "Oh, you're not allowed to be in here. Yeah, there's a restraining order." It wasn't that. He was like, "I have nowhere to go. You were sleeping with another man in the bed. Where was I going to sleep? I slept in the office. I slept in the our place of business." And she's like, "Yeah, wow, that's horrible," and then frames him for arson.
Shout out
Like, it
mental
literally
illness.
went where it's like not performing well to bed, and then 24 hours later, he is a wanted man for arson and has to flee the country.
And you know what? To be honest, I didn't feel bad. When all was said and done, whatever the revenge he took, I didn't feel bad.
Oh, for Julie Depley's character,
No, I didn't
right?
feel bad. I was like, "You know what? You kinda deserve that." Technically, you had it coming.
I mean, yeah,
It was a
but
little
we'll
much.
we'll
Everything in
get
this
into
movie was
that
much.
in a little bit later,
But they
but
framed the character to where, like, you feel bad for him, and then he does what he does, and then you're just kinda like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have
and
framed him
what
for
I think
murder." I
is
mean,
one of the
arson.
best is
Yeah.
that the fact that her pettiness is coming from shame because she feels a sense of shame that like her husband can't consummate the marriage. And she's like, oh, I'm revolted. I'm all this. And he's like, fine, I'm going to get back at you and show you how much I love you. That's that mental instability that
Mental
I love
illness.
seeing. Not in real life, but I love seeing it on camera.
Shout out mental illness. No, I wanna say, though, in all seriousness, the movie is a power struggle the whole time.
Yes.
It is 2 people just trying to almost one up each other. It's the struggle for power, and they do it very, very well
Hmm.
because she yeah, she's just kind of this vindictive woman, but she needs the upper hand at all times, and I think that's why she gets so extreme. And then he gets it's just a power for struggle in the relationship. That's awesome.
Yeah, and
In an
it's so
extreme way,
grand.
obviously. Yeah.
It's so grand, and then also the involvement with, like, the other characters that come in, like, the brother character who's, like, back in Poland, who's so
Yeah.
happy he's back because he's a horrible hairstylist, and now everyone wants Carol Carol again, which, by the way, Carol Carol, the name, I love it. Could you imagine if there was an American movie and it was, like, Steve Steve? That'd be great. I think that needs to happen more often. But yeah, this guy's first and last name is Carol Carol.
That's okay.
I mean,
I'm
it's
with it.
unique. It's interesting.
Very
It's
Christmas.
already, you're already doing a double take with his name in the beginning. You know that you now you know that you can go even farther when you start messing with the man's name like that. Like, so you introduce all these different characters like Yorick and Mikolai and things like that, and it's great interaction because you kind of see how at first he kind of with the whole power struggle between him and his wife, you kind of start seeing that but in a more positive light with the people that's around him, you know, whether it's the Polish gangsters, his relationship and friendship with Mikolai, how now he boosts up his brother's business and is like, okay, okay, you got to keep it up and maintain it now, like all of these, like how he kind of uses people to level up in a positive or negative light is really interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right, we got to talk more into. Let's focus solely on the characters right now. Obviously, Carol is the star of the show. We see his whole adventure arc and everything like that in its full glory. I really think, honestly, Carol is probably one of my favorite film characters of all time, just because of how you have this completely broken man who doesn't know what to do, then all of a sudden comes up with the most grand idea of becoming a millionaire and becoming famous and successful and getting back at his wife. And he does it. It's not like, oh, false dreams. Oh, I'm going to try and not succeed. He actually does it.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting because you don't I wouldn't have expected that from the character. The character in the beginning is very timid,
Hmm.
and he's just, kind of this soft-spoken man. And then the character development that takes place, he just turns into this very menacing character,
Hmm.
very focused, very intense. So to see that throughout the movie is very interesting because I wouldn't have when you first showed me this, I was just like, oh, this poor guy's gonna go die or something like
He's going to die in a suitcase
he's
in
gonna die
Poland.
in the snow and ice in Poland. That was really depressing. That first scene.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, oh, he's not coming back.
But it really, I think that character is probably one of the best characters in all time, just because the complexity behind him, how he goes from I love her, I'm gonna win her back, this is how I'm gonna do it. And he, it's kind of like he inadvertently tells the audience like, stick with me, I know what I gotta do, and we're just like, okay, Carol, you do what you
Yeah.
gotta do, and we're just in it for the ride.
Well, what's
Um,
really if we're gonna talk about, like, instability, he does all this to show her how much he loves her.
yeah.
He gets revenge to be like, "Can't you see? This is how much I love you. I'm gonna do this for you." That's
Like,
really
there were so many simple ways that this could have gone. So many simple, like, literally, if he just wanted this whole storyline to end, this man literally could have taken a Viagra and snuck into the apartment and just boom, it would have been done and over with, you know?
That wasn't
But
enough.
no, he was like, "No, I have to go back to Poland. I have to go back to my roots. I have to cheat the Polish mafia without getting killed. I have to start a multi-million dollar business with my suicidal friend Mikolai."
Oh,
And
Mikolai.
Mikolai, like, it was just a lot. It
He
was a
was
lot, and it was great.
suicidal. That's
So
right, you met him at the train.
let's talk about Mikolai. Mikolai is also first of all, I think what this movie has that's very interesting is every person looks very interesting. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
anyone who looks like, Dominique or Carol or Mikolai. Like, everyone kind of has like a very distinct face and
Mhm.
feature. Mikolai being one of them. And Mikolai is kind of introduced as like kind of like this nice gentleman who helps Carol sneak back into Poland. He's like, yeah, why not? And then also reveals to him, like, hey, by the way, if you need to make some money, I know a guy who wants, to hire essentially a hitman to kill him. And he's willing to pay this, blah, blah, blah. And he's very nonchalant about it. He's very like, oh, yeah, he's just a dude who wants to die, you know? He's got kids and a wife, but like, whatever, very, very nonchalant about it. And there is a little twist. I mean, it kind of is a little bit foreseeable, but the twist is that it's Mikolai, who is suicidal, who wants to die, and he's just like, I'm just stuck. I just play bridge on the weekends. I got nothing going for me right now. And I really like that setup of the scene where Carol fires a blank first, essentially, and goes and points it at him. And so he fires the blank, and Mikolai is kind of overwhelmed with like fear, anxiety, and just kind of falls to the floor. And Carol goes, "That was a blank. The next bullet is real. Are you sure you want it?" And then Mikolai's like, "No." And then they get drunk and they go skiing on the ice. And I love that. It
Besties.
it went from, "Hey, thanks for scaring me there with the real gun and the real bullet. I would rather drink some vodka now and go running on the ice."
No, they're best friends. We need to go
It
as them for Halloween.
It's
That's it.
great. It's great, and, he kinda pledged, and he still gets the money from Mikolai because he's a stand-up guy, he's like, "Hey, I mean, you did fire the gun at me," and hands him, like, the 5,000 and things like that. So, I really like the relationship that Carol and Mikolai had, and kinda how they went from two men just completely down on their luck, depressed, everything, to now being very successful business partners, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they found, like, desperation in each other.
Yeah. And I just also like the scene where, Carol has on his like new three-piece suit. He's got the BMW and he's
Styling.
bringing Christmas presents to Mikolai and he's like, "Hey, I want you to join this business with me." Which I'm still not entirely sure what that business was.
Are
I
we
think
sure it's legal too? Because I just assume he kind of I just assume he kind of, like, did some
well, I
immoral
know like
like
well, yeah, cuz he scammed the mafia,
So I think
the
he is
Polish
the
mafia.
mafia. Maybe he is the Polish mafia
You know
now.
what I thought it was? I thought it was kinda like a TJ Maxx situation. Let me explain. You know, in TJ Maxx, when you go in, they have, like, everything that's in every other store, but not supposed to be in TJ Maxx?
Yeah.
I think that's what he was doing with, like, the docks and things like that. Like, pretty much getting in, like, a bunch of not counterfeit, but maybe, like, "Oh, the boat is lost," air quote, but now it's just going to a TK Maxx in Poland because they have TK Maxxes over in England. But just that's what I thought it was, just some kind of like New Jersey style dock bad word. I don't know what exactly it's called.
I can see that. I mean, I think he is the Polish mafia now, though. I do think he is doing some illegal stuff.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, with the whole body, they do get a dead body. They do literally kill someone to get a dead body at some point.
Yeah, he's the
So
mafia. He is the
definitely.
Polish mafia. That's
I
it.
don't think he's. Yeah, I don't think he's no. I don't think he's a Don Corleone.
No,
You know.
but he's there. He's doing
Yeah,
it.
he's like the middleman, I think, but still very well endowed. But yeah, I really enjoy the Mikolai and Kara Carol's relationship throughout and how it just kind of grows, it expands, and they both really help each other out. I liked Yorik, also known as Carol's brother, Yorik Carol.
Mhm.
I liked him. I thought he provided a little. He was a very weird character. He spoke very weirdly, very. I don't know. He was just like very like oh like as soon as like the moment that they came into town, like, he was like, "Oh, no one wants me to do their hair now." Like
Simple man with simple problems.
exactly, and I like the little chuckles here and there that that character provided and stuff. Now let's talk about Dominique
Ugh,
and just the madness that she is. Like,
y
she is the epitome of a scorn woman.
for no reason, in my
For no
opinion.
reason other than humiliation, but really, like, keep in mind that whole thing could have been kept behind closed doors, but she had to be the one to go all around town, file the divorce, tell everyone about the divorce, about everything that was going on.
It really could just be simple as, like, she was, like, embarrassed because she thought it was her fault, and she just lashed out on Carol about it.
Yeah, and she could have done a very different approach. She could have been very quiet, maybe distant, maybe start exploring around with other men, and it could have been a quiet facade. But she decided to be explosive, fiery, downright humiliate the man. Like, could you imagine being in court and also keep in mind not fully speaking French, speaking Polish, needing a translator, and hearing it twice in French and then in Polish that your wife wants to divorce you because you can't have sex with her in
She
front of a
deserved
full
it.
court?
She deserved what came to her. Really, in all honesty, because not only the divorce, she calls him up to be like, "Look, somebody else can pleasure me." And then, like, she on top of that, she's like, "Yeah, you know what? I want you to be arrested too. Like, you didn't pay enough."
Yeah, it's just whack. And then also on top of that, when they're in the course, we got Juliette Mignonc who comes in real quick, from Blue, and now she's involved in this for like a split second. And now I wonder, like, do you ever think her character in Blue just kind of because she walks in for a second and then before she's redirected elsewhere, and they kind of like the camera like kind of shows that like everyone kind of turns their head at Julie from Blue and everything like that. So it's very like now we're intertwined. Now even the woman from Blue who's doing all her grieving, on top of all her grieving, now knows the drama that is
Now she's gotta
this.
listen to this, I know.
So and I really do like that little I always like those little like quick moments, even if it's just little cameos and stuff. I like how it shows that everything is connected. And we'll definitely talk about the connectiveness towards the end when we talk about Red. But Dominique, man, just a scorned woman.
One of the things this movie has, in my opinion, over Red and Blue is the characters are just a lot more interesting, for lack of better words. Every character in this movie is so animative, and I want to watch them, and I am totally, and I'm trying to think of the word.
There was definitely a different
I
energy
am more
level.
invested in Carol and Dominique than I was in the other people.
I think also
They're
there was a huge energy difference too, because everyone is pretty somber in Blue and even in
It felt
Red.
like they were far away. The characters were a lot more distant, and I feel like in White, a lot of them are just a lot more
Oh,
for the
they're
audience, just
open books.
attainable, just attainable. Like you can kind of relate, not relate in terms of like, oh, like I am going through the same thing.
Yeah.
But with Carol, you understand like there's a lot of shame. And you're rooting for the character. That's another thing. You the whole time you're watching this movie, you're rooting for the character, you're invested. And then with Red and Blue, it's more like you are just passing through somebody's story.
Yeah, Blue definitely majority of the characters are reserved and into themselves, and you get that impression. Where even as in Red, Red is very centered on invading privacy. Even there's still kind of I feel like Red relates more to Blue than White because it's that sense of we're not supposed to see this. You it kind of gives the impression because
There's
since
a
it's all
tone.
yeah, like there's all that like invasion of privacy thing. It's like, oh, we're not supposed to hear this versus in Blue where it's like she does not want us to know. That's just kind of the impression, that the characters give to the audience. Whereas this, it's like open book. You're going to know everything about my life. You're going to know that I did this. And I mean, it all starts too with how these characters interact with every other characters. You know, uh, Veronique, she tells everyone in the court what's going on, like an open book. Whereas Carol tells the guy Mikolai in the subway station what's going on with his life and everything too. So I think you're able to feel more for the characters because the characters are definitely a lot more open to the audience.
Yeah. Yep.
So we got to talk about now the events that happen. So let's do a correct timeline of this. We got the divorce in court. We got not Juliet, Dominique sleeping around and she's moaning on the phone, which was such a low blow. No pun intended. But that was harsh to listen to. He flees to the subways. He meets Mikolai. He gets smuggled into Poland, where and then gets like captured and gets beaten and dumped over a hill in the Polish hills in like the middle of like dirt, like in nowhere,
Just ice and dirt, yeah.
just in the dirt. He goes and visits his brother. He starts staying with his brother and starts working for his brother. Then he intercepts the Polish mafia by finding out that they want to purchase a spot of land because they know that commercial businesses want to purchase that land. So essentially he screws the Polish mafia by buying the land first and selling it for double what they were going to originally pay for.
Crazy.
Then he starts his business. Then he finds a body. Then he pretends to die. Then he gets
Fakes his
his
death.
former fakes his death, gets his former wife back into the country of Poland. Sees her and spies on her crying. He cries. He sleeps with her, can get it up. She's arrested. He sees her in the prison. And she goes, I can't wait to be with you. I love you. And like, what a wild ride that is.
What is wrong with her? You understand that, like, she leaves this man for a medical issue, and then he comes back, it's somehow fixed, right? It's somehow I don't know how it's fixed. She falls in love with him just with that little moment. He frames her for his murder, and she's like, "This is what I wanted the whole time. This is what I wanted you to do."
It
There's a
makes
problem. There's a mental issue.
And then also, like, keep in mind too, now the Carol's identity is gone because he had just faked his death
Oh, yeah.
and has pinned it to Dominique. And that's why Dominique is in jail. And
Uh,
she's like, "Ah, so romantic." Like, what?
dude, and then he still wants her. He still wants
Ah, he
her.
pulls away, he sees her in the tower. Oh my god, like little like Shrek or like Rapunzel or Fiona in the
Shrek.
tower. Sees her in the tower behind bars and she's doing like little sign language and going, "I love you. After this, we'll get married again." He pulls away from the binoculars. Homie's crying. Homie is sobbing. You
Well,
know,
let's not
just like
forget, throughout the movie, there are, like, these, what we think are flashbacks to their wedding day,
yeah.
when we realize that's actually probably the future, that they're gonna get remarried.
Probably. That could be I think it
That's
maybe be especially because of the lack of details, you only see the woman's face. Like, her veil and all the rice being thrown is literally covering up everyone else's face. So it easily could be their wedding from the past or the idea of them getting remarried.
I do think they get remarried.
Now, let me ask you this because we talked about the color of blue in the movie Blue. I do feel like this one, in terms of directing, does lack. It makes up for it in story, but it does lack in directing. Because even though in those sequences, yes, you see the white and everything like this, I feel like the color could have been utilized a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the only time we are surrounded by the white is really in Poland and those little flashbacks or future moments. But
Like
I
the
agree, I think
flashbacks,
the
and then
white.
also, like, let's not forget he steals, like, a marble statue from a store, and that's, like, all white and everything like that. But I do feel like I will say, though, using white in the film and making it appeasing to the eye without it just seeming like there's just a light shining into the camera lens, I would think it's pretty hard.
No, I agree. I think the difference is, though, with blue and red, blue, those colors surround the movie.
Yeah,
You're always immersed in like this red or bluish tone. But white didn't really do that. We were kind of missing that visual. Visually, it definitely lacks. It's
for
very different
sure.
from the other
I
movies.
wish maybe instead of just the color white, they would've maybe played around with a lot more texture. Like, I feel like if they instead of focusing solely on the color white, maybe, like, for example, since, Dominique and them, they were married before and they think about getting married after, maybe white lace should have been emphasized or maybe something with more texture, you know?
Yeah, they could have done that for sure.
Even more marble, even like just things that with more texture that were more distinguishable than just like white walls and everything, I think would have worked out a lot better for the movie.
No,
Because like with
yeah.
with blue, you could shine a blue light, and it's like, oh, blue, I get the reference. Or have a light shine through blue objects. Whereas this, it's like you're very limited.
Yeah, visually the movie lacks, but I do think maybe he was going for more like a plot heavy film. Because at the end of the day, the movie, in a lot of ways, even sometimes with dialogue, it does lack a little bit.
Hmm.
But I think he really wanted to go for like this plot. I think that was the main thing with this movie. And you can kind of tell
Yeah,
that the
and it,
plot
it it does
just
say
drove the
that
movie.
almost every shot in the movie contains at least one white object, but doesn't life? Like, I feel like there's so many white objects that we use in life? I feel like
Everything
it's
can be
not like
technically, there are a lot of everyday things that are white.
yeah.
So, mm, you know,
Maybe even playing around more with, like, maybe, like, mist, like, maybe, like, a cloudy colored, like, mist, I think would have been cool, especially because like, in those dream sequences, there's definitely a little bit of a haze to it. I
yeah,
think definitely
that's
they could
that's
have taken a
exactly what they
photo
could have done. Yeah.
of like let's say like they did Poland at night where it was snowy and stuff, maybe adding like focusing more on like because the Poland's cold during this time. Maybe they could have focused more on like the breathing and the cold and like the white little clouds that come out and things like that. I think they definitely could have played around a little bit more with the directing.
Oh, for sure. But I really think I mean the plot, it's a banger. It's a banger. And um I just like the power struggle between this couple because essentially they're just like playing games with each other.
Yeah.
And that's what kinda keeps them together in a way. But they both have this desire in the movie to just bring each other to their knees, essentially.
Yeah,
And
and really just establish control of the relationship. And even in the end, you can definitely tell that this is always going to be an ongoing battle between them because Dominique in the end, and I have it here in sign language, she actually signs, "You and I will leave together when I'll get out of jail, right? Or we'll stay here together and we'll get married again." Which is once again her kind of taking control of
like,
the
yeah,
entire
telling him what we're
situation.
gonna do. Right.
Yeah, like, "Hey, after I get out of prison, you're going to marry me in Poland and we'll stay in Poland again." Like, very now all of a sudden kind of like faking the idea of like, "Hey, like I know you want to be in Poland cuz you have a business here, so we'll stay here." But at the end of the day, she's still in control. That's womanomics number no 101, you know?
Womanomics!
That's just something that is done by very controlling people.
Yeah, and again, this is a couple that is gonna just play games with each other. She will find, I guarantee you, if she went through all this trouble for a medical problem, this man is gonna end up in a ditch somewhere. One of them's gonna die, eventually.
Oh, for sure. You know, something's going to catch up to them eventually. Whether it's that or like even for example, like I don't even want to imagine this couple having a kid.
Oh,
Dear
no.
lord. You know, oh,
Absolutely
mother's
not.
in prison again because I had to prove my love to her. Like just whack. But overall, is there anything else you want to comment on the film? I mean, obviously, great music, you know, that's
No.
a no-brainer. It's
Yeah.
the big new Prisnia. He's a
And,
genius. He's one of my favorites.
no, I love the movie. I really love the story. It is my favorite. I think it is the most entertaining. It's a really good revenge movie. It's probably the best revenge movie.
Mhm.
One of the best, at least. Um, Fantastic. My favorite.
Yeah. So, obviously, I can't ask the question, DVD, would you own it? So, because we both have it. So, what's your rating for the movie?
Hmm, do I want to give it a So I'm gonna
Wow.
give it a 9.7 out of 10.
Okay.
There's
I would definitely,
some slow moments.
I think for me, I would probably give it it's definitely the highest ranking for me in the Three Colors trilogy, that's for sure, because I think the plot definitely exceeds the other pros of blue and red, respectively. So, I would probably give this movie like for some reason 9.5 seems low compared to yours, but I'm going to
It's
say
really not.
9.5 because I really do think that it could have been more visually appealing. I
Yeah.
know Kieslowski had it in him. I know this man had it in him. So then I wanted to see more of that from the visuals and playing around with the visuals and whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
So, other than that, I think the acting is the best in this one. I really wish Zbigniew Zamachowski, who plays Caro, really was able. I wish honestly he was one of those actors who kind of dived into like more features because I don't really see him in a lot of other things except for because he's in Decalogue. But I really wish we could see him more in other Euro movies and even in American movies too.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I really do like his acting, and I think he just has a very
He's
distinct
unique.
look to him.
Yeah.
All right. So next we're gonna be talking about Red. Would you like to do the intro for Red, or shall I?
I will do it.
Okay.
Okay. Three Colors Red is about a model that discovers a retired judge who is keen on invading people's privacy. So it stars Irene Jacob, Jean Louis.
I got you. Jean Louis Trintignant.
Very nice. Can
Someone
you say the
corrected me.
next one? Can you
Someone when
say
I was
the
16 shamed me on YouTube because I pronounced it as Trigonant. And someone
Trigonant?
was
That's what
like,
I was
"You're
gonna say.
stupid because you don't know how to pronounce it." And I had to ask help from someone who was studying French at the time.
No, you
Thanks
said
a lot, unnamed user.
that was rude. Whatever.
Very rude.
And then there's another uh Frederic.
Yeah, Frederic Feder.
Yeah, that's who it stars. What did you think of the movie?
So I did enjoy Red. I would have to say
Yeah.
Red is probably my second favorite movie, a part of the trilogy. Of course, like I've always said, that they're all great. But more specifically, without getting to the spoiler parts just yet, I really enjoy the relationship that is had between Valentine, Irene Jacobs' character, and the judge, Jean Louis Trignogno's character. I really enjoyed their relationship, and I also really enjoyed the parallels that were present between, the character Frederic, who we really don't get to know, but we just kind of see at a distance and how things are correlating and how worlds are colliding and things like that. So I was a really big fan of that. And also, I love the ending. I love the ending, and I think it was such a brilliant way to end the trilogy. What did you think about
Yeah.
Red?
No, I really liked Red too. It's really close to being number 1 for me. I obviously like White, just the plot is better in my opinion, but Red, I like the theme of human connection and how we connect to people and how we try to, obviously he's spying on people, but it really is about for me like human connection and the way we try to connect with others in our lives. And I think the movie has good pacing, good characters, very good visuals. I will
Mhm.
say very much better than White, close to Blue. Yeah, I just appreciated a lot of the themes in the movie. Pretty good pacing. The ending is great. The ending just ties everything together. It's perfect. Very close to first for me. I really enjoyed a lot of the themes presented.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique relationship that's present. And I will say, I am very happy that it was because you could definitely take a movie like this, and with everything that's happening, you can definitely try to add some type of sexual tension between the judge and the young girl. And
Yeah.
I'm happy that wasn't happened. I liked it. It was more used by the old man as like seeing this young woman as a time of reflection rather and like seeing like what would have happened in his life and things like that rather than just looking at the young woman to look at a young woman.
Oh, for sure. That would have changed I think a lot of the movie, a lot of the tone. I'm glad they didn't go that way.
Yeah. And it also has a really great character arc for the judge. How he's this really bitter, hateful hermit judge who, retired and is now just spying on other people and kind of doing his own form of self-justice,
Yeah.
but not really doing any call to action. And he meets this young girl who really just starts changing his ways and realize that like, hey, there's more to life than just being a bitter old man?
Yeah, because the guy, he does have like this god complex a little bit. But really at the end of the day, it's just kind of we come to know that this is just like loneliness.
Yeah.
And again, I really like the connection theme that they use with the girl. And I like your point about if they would have made it sexual. I think the theme of like loneliness and connection and even like judgment, it would have been overshadowed.
Mhm.
So I'm glad they didn't do that. But again, I think the judge had this god complex, and like you said, he was using a lot of the spying to continue his job essentially, like as just a judge, even though he was retired.
Yeah.
But I like how the main character kind of comes in and he is relieved of a lot of the loneliness and a lot of the reasons why he does it in the first place because he finally made that like genuine connection with somebody.
Yeah. And I think it's also it's just like I said, a really great character arc, but I really love the character of Valentine because
Hmm.
honestly, I do think Carol is still one of the best characters of all time in my opinion. I think Valentine is probably one of the most relatable female characters. And it's because of
Hmm.
this to me, it's just because the way that she kind of interacts with the people around her, or at least for me, I found her very relatable because I've always been someone who's like, well, like I always hung out with older people, like actual old people. So I felt like this had a really great relatability to me, but I also think for other people too. And also just her interactions with the people around her. I don't know. I feel like she was just a really great I don't think she was very specific, but I really think she was a very well written average woman, if that makes sense. Like she didn't have to be
Yeah.
entirely special, but she really just was a great average woman. And that sounds like I'm playing it down or something like
No,
that,
no.
but
They
I
didn't
think she
try to
was well
make her
written.
a hero in the movie. Like, she didn't come in here and be like the guy was, like, falling to his knees, "You saved my life." She really is just this average person. I think there's a lot of humanity in the character too.
Yeah, and even for someone who is a model, even though you get these little glimpses and stuff of like little still glamorous aspects of her life, they don't she's not like, they don't show her as like a Kendall Jenner type of figure, but she's very human. She's very, curious and young and very like I really liked and enjoyed the way she was written.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a character like this, especially someone who is trying to change an older man for the better, I feel like if you don't not know how to master the dialogue, you can make the character come across very pestering or just overall annoying. And I
That's
don't
what
think
I'm
that
yeah,
happens at all with Irene Jacobs' character.
that's what I'm saying, they didn't make her into, like, a superhero.
Yes.
Like, she wasn't trying with the goal of, like, "I need to change this man's life." She was literally just showing, like, some humanity to a man that was clearly just lonely and felt like he had to bring justice to the world, you know? So I think you're very right. I really think that they made her character very relatable too.
Yeah.
And
And even, like, with little aspects, like, we never see her boyfriend, but we hear her boyfriend on the phone and how he treats her and things like that, and kinda how, like, their relationship, evolves, and then also the background story of her brother, her brother being a drug addict and everything too,
mm,
just very humanizes her while also providing a sense of complexity to her character and to her background.
absolutely.
So and I really she has a really great, screen presence. Ooh, sorry, I got a little frog in my throat. Oh, I shouldn't say frog, you don't like frogs. Sorry.
I'll let it
Um,
slide.
so yeah, so I really think, and I know she's in other of Kieslowski films. I believe isn't she in the not Double Life of Veronique, but actually yeah, she is
I
she
think I
is
was gonna say
Veronique.
no, she's Veronique.
She's
Yeah.
Veronique. I she has a really great screen presence. There's something about her. I don't know. She's very alluring. She's not like
Yeah, that's the word, alluring.
overly glamour. She's not, she's very. I don't know. She's just very
She's very
alluring. Her
subtle.
character.
She's
Yeah.
also a very subtle actress, which works to her benefit a lot
Hmm.
in the characters that she plays.
For sure. And so let's comment on the judge character. Obviously Jean-Louis Trintignant. Have you ever seen him in any other work prior?
I don't think so.
I really liked him in a movie called Il Sorpasso.
Mm.
Italian film with centering around a car and stuff. But I think and he's also in like a lot of really well-known movies. He's in Z, he's in The Conformist, and in
Oh, I've seen
2012
yeah, you're right.
he's in
Yeah,
that movie.
I have
And
seen that.
And I really would love and I'm bringing this up because I really would love to talk about this movie. He says one of his, best performances that he ever did that for him personally was in a movie called Amour in 2012. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I have.
So I think that's something we should definitely check up on and things like that. And I think he said that Z and Amour are things that he think are like his two most important. And for those who don't know, Amour is about a older couple, but they're very young at heart, and the wife suffers a stroke, and it's just kind of just figuring out how to navigate through being old and going through health issues and coming to terms with that. So I've always thought he's a great actor, and I really think he did a fantastic job at selling, the bitter old resentful man in this character, but without being irredeemable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Because they make him unlikable enough to where you don't like him, but you're also not rooting against him the whole time.
And he has a great background story too. Like he was with a woman who yeah, like the whole thing about him when he was trying to become a judge and essentially and I could be mistaken with a few details here and there, but from what I recall, he was with a woman, she cheats on him, she ends up dying in an accident and he never got closure. And then all of a sudden, now here is the man who she cheated on him with in his court. And he sentenced the guy guilty and everything like that, and realized the mistake he made because he voted the guy was guilty based off his own past with the guy rather than because if you're a judge, you're not supposed to do that, I
Oh, no,
believe.
yeah. That's
So especially in like a more high profile case like with the the guy had in terms of that circumstance. And so essentially sends the guy as guilty and shortly after retires because
Yeah.
he knows that he messed up and that he broke one of like the biggest rules in law. So I really like the complexity of that character, but the parallel between that character and uh, then we start getting to Augustus. Oh, I'm totally messed up. I thought Frederic was a man. Frederic is the name of a woman. I apologize. The male character who kind of comes in, who we don't really get a total glimpse of his life fully. We just know that he's a law student and stuff like that.
Mhm.
His name is Augustus, played by Jean Pierre Lorit.
Yeah.
But essentially, we start seeing. It's almost like it almost just seems like Irene Jacob met the judge who is kind of like, I will say, an older version of her soulmate. But there's not any
Mm.
sexual tension or anything like that. And we start realizing that when we see the parallels between the judge and Augustus.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I thought that was a really good idea because it kind of gives insight to how she not only helped uh the judge recover his past, but
Right.
when she meets, her predicted soulmate, although it's never confirmed in the end, it's just kind of alluding to, she knows how to cater to that circumstance.
Yeah.
So
Which
I really like that. And was there anything else about the Valentine, the judge, or Augustus that you enjoyed?
I actually wanna talk about how, like, the movie is made, like, the directing and everything in this, because
Yeah.
that's what I think is essential here. I
Yes.
think every scene about this movie is very purposeful. Everything is
Yes.
orchestrated with a purpose, and I think that's one of the most unique things with this movie, aside from white and blue. There was a lot of purpose. Tones, color, cinematography, even the music.
Yes.
Everything seemed to have a purpose in this movie. So I think that is what sets it apart from the others. And I think that's what's super important and what really draws your attention to the movie, because it's not like Blue, where there are some times where, in my opinion, it did kind of lag and not everything was super in, but with Red, and even white too, not everything was super, super essential, but with red, I think they put a lot of detail and time.
Yeah.
Especially since if this is the order, yeah, you're supposed to watch this last.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. So I do think visually, um, and just all the technical aspects, this is probably the most impressive, because the most time I think was spent on this in terms
And
of
I
detail
I
and
think
color.
overall in the trilogy too, it is probably the most, even though I think you and I can both agree white is our personal favorite. I think this one, in terms of like which is the best overall, I would definitely say that red is the best overall because of that
Yeah.
directing. And even though blue is greatly directed, the red in here is just visually stunning. And then also we the parallel imaging used, because you have parallel characters, the parallel imaging used between Irene Jacob Valentine's modeling shoot and then tying it in with the end and everything is very like, you weren't expecting that. At least for me,
I
I wasn't
wasn't.
expecting that iconic image to be tied in at the end so seamlessly and so perfectly, but also with being incredibly realistic. And I think it's also a great end to the movie because it really gives a sense where it's like, especially in the end, when after you watch blue and after you watch white, you kind of are left wondering like what's next. You don't get like solid concrete endings. This kind of gives like a really nice tie-in and conclusion to where it's like we can assume that the best is happening.
Yeah.
So, and just also like it's visually appealing, and then also that you're dealing with a really great character because there is one trope that occurs in all three movies, and you see an elderly woman trying to put this recycled bottle in this little recycling thing, and she's too small and she got to step on her tippy toes. I feel like it was a great way to show that, like, the chapter was closing in on this book because at the end, Irene Jacobs' character, Valentine, is the only one to help the old woman.
Yeah.
Everyone else just sits and watches this old woman struggle as she's standing on her tippy toes, putting in a recycled bottle in the chute, and she's too small and she's struggling. Irene Jacobs' character is the only one to help her, and I really think that that also signifies that out of all the characters, she's the best example. She is the
Yeah,
best example to look at.
she represents humanity,
Yes.
where the other characters are just and I don't even think, what's the woman from White Blue's name?
From Blue, her name is, Julie.
I don't even think Julie's a bad person, but there's a lot of self-involvement when it comes to grief.
Yes.
So I think that's what's going on there, and then everybody in white is a problem. So I think and to end it that way too, I think is perfect. To give us a reflection on humanity and just there's another word I wanna use for her, but I can't think of it.
She's
Whatever.
very soulful. She represents a lot of different she just
Intentional.
overall is just represents a lot of good,
She's an intentional character.
for sure.
So I think to end it that way and to give us like, hey, like this is what really your life should look like, what your character, what you should thrive for. These other people suck,
Mhm.
and the one person's going through a hard time. So I think it's great that they ended it on that note instead of because I think if for some reason the trilogy went the opposite way, it wouldn't have been as satisfying for the audience too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I completely agree. And overall, like not only did this movie conclude the chapter of the Three Colors trilogy, but this movie literally concluded the career of Kieslowski because he
Uh,
retired after, which I think was so strategically done well. I mean, you're going to have a movie like this end where it circumvents like not only people who he's worked with his past, but also, circumvents this new trilogy that meant a lot to him, and just that beautiful tie-in at the end and everything was really great. And even like I must say, for characters like Augustus, who we really don't know about except that he's a law student who ends up getting cheated on, the film really does a solid job at showing him and displaying his empathy while also showing those once again the parallels between him and the judge and that darkness that's inside of him. And I say that because right before he goes on the boat, he actually leaves his dog tied up to a tree. And kind of in a way parallel to the judge, where the judge was like, I don't care about the dog in the beginning. He
yeah.
shortly goes back and goes, "Ugh," and takes the dog back and, becomes a normal dog owner again and not leaving his dog tied up to a tree and whatnot. But there's just so many small parallels. And I really just loved
Oh,
it.
yeah, to have the 2 characters, like, battling with betrayal and
And
just
even
become these bitter people.
the parallels now that Irene Jacobs' character Valentine, which also by the way, Valentine Red, brilliant name to choose. Um Not only having the character Valentine and Augustus, you know, now meeting each other by chance, setting it up to where it's fate and everything, but now having us shown that she's also gone through a similar experience with her breakup.
Yeah.
I overall just incredible writing. But let's talk about that ending. So the ending is where essentially Irene Jacob decides to go. I think she's going to swim across, not swim, to go on a boat that goes across the English Channel. And by the way, the boat sinking and everything is based off a real life incident that happened, where essentially a huge boat like carrying like 300 people just sank.
That's insane.
Yeah. So it's based off that, but essentially she goes and Augustus is there too. And they don't that you see them kind of like going on different levels, and it's like, oh, like you're wondering, are they gonna make it? Are they gonna make it? And the judge, turns on the TV to see how thing is. And keep in mind, he doesn't watch TV. He turns on the TV by chance, and all of a sudden they say, oh, the boat sank. And there's only 6 survivors. And the survivors that are shown are um, Julie and not Patrice, but the other guy from Blue, the one
Yeah.
who she was sleeping with. Then we show Carol and not is it
Dominique.
Veronique? Dominique. I was like Veronique? No. Dominique. Which by the way, how she gets out of jail.
Right? That was quick.
That was very quick. What she served?
That was
6
quick.
months? 6 months in a federal prison?
Maybe he, like, told on himself.
Well,
He
anyways,
just showed up, he's like, "I'm alive." Yeah,
they were
let her out.
escaping. They were fleeing. But so then you have them two, and then it shows Valentine and Augustus as the last two survivors, and that's when the infamous, red photo is recreated, where she's just kind of pointing her head at a distance. And it was like a gum advertisement too, but it recreates it and it just generates a lot of emotion. You see the emotion in the judge's eyes and things like that. And it's a beautiful ending to one hell of a trilogy.
Fantastic. One of the best endings because it just gives you closure with everything.
For sure. And that's why it's so important if you're going to watch this to watch Red last. Because if you watch Red in the beginning and things like that, I feel like that ending would not be as sweet as
It
if you
wouldn't.
watched it
No.
as a first
They're not
movie.
gonna know you're not gonna know who the other people are.
Yeah. You might be like, is that Julie Depley from the Before series? That's all you might go. But overall, what is your final rating of Red?
Uh, I gave blue, I believe I gave blue a 9. Then I gave white a 9.7. So I'm gonna do a 9.5.
Okay. So meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
I probably give Red a 9.3.
Okay.
9.3. I think the directing is the best. There are some slow bits here and there and some unnecessary moments too. Like I think there's a moment where she's talking to like a stripper that I didn't think was necessarily needed and whatnot and stuff with the relationship with her father and things like that. Yeah, that's Red, right?
I think so.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. But there's like these little moments here and there that I just think weren't needed. I think they also could have shortened a little bit like the things about Augustus's life. I think with showing everything still,
That
they
could have
just could
been
have
wrapped
shortened
up.
scenes
Yeah.
for sure. And it also would have been a more like it just kind of seems like, oh, they're really hinting at the idea that they're going to get together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it could have been a little bit more subtle, so that way we'd be like, oh, I didn't know, you know? Um, so yeah, that is the final verdict. So in order, the ranking for me, and I think it's the same for you, would be number 3 blue, number 2 red, number 1 white.
Yep.
That is the official Purple Noon ranking of the Trois Colors trilogy, also known as Three Colors trilogy. Um, Yeah, if honestly, if you're actually going to consider if you don't have any criterions, if you just like watching movies, this is honestly one of the ones that I think is absolutely worth it. I think
Yeah.
all like most criterions are worth it, but I think this one for the set and everything is so worth it. But if you can't shell out the $60 because I think it's like
It's
$60 right
40
now,
on Amazon.
it's what?
It's 40 on Amazon.
Well, check Amazon. I will link it in the script
Yeah.
or wherever.
That's a steal.
That's really good. Or else if you have HBO Max or even Criterion Channel, I'm not sure if it's on Criterion Channel, but I know it says it's on HBO Max.
It is on
So
HBO, yeah.
you can view it on HBO Max. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to our Trois Colères trilogy review. We've been waiting for this one. I think this is like honestly one of the first ideas that we thought we were going to review.
Yes.
And alas, here we are a year and a half later, finally reviewing it. So thank you everyone for listening. As always, shout out to Homeboy James and shout out to Sensei David for supporting us. They support us through Patreon. And if you would like us to know, would like to help us, and if you would like a shout out at every end of the episode, check out our Patreon. I also updated the tiers. You get a little bit more bonuses. So I totally forgot to tell you, Sweet Pea. But
It's okay.
now if someone
It's a good
does the
surprise.
$5 a month, they get to suggest 5 films for us to review every year.
Cool.
$10, 10 films every year. So those are some perks and things like that. And obviously things like, over the time as we continue to grow, there will be more and more that we can start offering. Like especially when our time frees up, we definitely are going to be exploring the option of maybe like Patreon only or YouTube subscription only videos, little extras and things like that here and there.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, come on, they got to pay for Freak Week. Are you kidding me? I
Oh
can't
my
suffer
god.
and endure
Listen,
all that stuff.
Greek week is coming soon, so you guys better figure it out.
You gotta figure it
It's
out. Save
coming
your
soon.
dollars. Save your dollars. Save your
Save your
quarters.
pennies. Come
For
on.
sure. For sure. So we'll have to figure out how we'll introduce Freak Week and stuff, because there's no way you're gonna have me sit and watch Solo, Antichrist, and all these movies without making a dime. I'm telling you right now,
That is
because
the yeah, no.
I gotta pay
Your
up to my
mental health?
therapist afterwards.
Actually, no, yeah. We gotta
So
cover the fees. We gotta cover the mental health fees.
there's that. We also got some other episodes coming up, including sometime soon we're going to be talking about Twin Peaks season 3, which I finally
Woo!
started, and oh wow, what a doozy so far. Holy crap, that thing is long, but it's good. But yeah, so keep in touch. I don't know what else we're going to be talking about soon, so we have to review about what we're going to talk about. But anyways, thank you so much for listening to us. All links and everything like that are in the description if you're listening to YouTube. We're also available on Audemic Media, Spotify, and a lot more. Thank you guys so much for listening, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.